Okay.
All right.
Good evening, colleagues, friends, students. I'm Dr. Leisha Nikudemans, and this evening we are going to have a session on introductions, backgrounds to the problems in your research, and also the problem statement. We're going to have a look at what the problem statement is and why it's so important in our work. So welcome. I'm sure that you've all had a long day already, so I hope that you have a cup of tea and a cup of tea or something to drink or something to eat with you, and we can get straight into it. So just give me a second. I'm just preparing to share my screen with you. Okay. You should be able to see my screen. And we will get going. So the first thing, okay, let's talk about the title, right? Writing a scientifically rigorous introductory overview, background to the problem and problem statement for your proposal, dissertation, and doctoral thesis. Now, even though we're working at different levels, so you might still be different levels and different stages. So you might be in the proposal phase, you might be in the dissertation, which means you're doing your master's, or you might be doing your doctoral work. You might be starting, you might be ending, but these are useful tools for us at any level and at every stage of our project. Because you write the proposal and the proposal will become the guide for your first chapter or your introduction to your dissertation or your doctoral thesis. So I wanted to play around a little bit and intellectually play around a little bit with this term scientifically rigorous. Because it's often thrown around in the academy, but sometimes I feel like we don't challenge its meaning or we don't construct enough discussion around its meaning. So I want to just start that conversation with you today. And you can think about how scientific rigor features in your work and the project that you are working on, also within your discipline and your field of interest. What does scientific rigor mean for you? So this term has various meanings within and across disciplines. Scientific rigor, it broadly means sound experimental research practices, right? This refers to experiment or research design, including methodology, analysis, interpretation, and reporting. What it means for all of us, it means that other work and understand exactly what you did in the course of your experiments or your research. Now, the term also implies important concepts such as bias and objectivity. And this is where the natural sciences and the humanities, the social sciences, and the arts might disagree. We contest, and I'm a scholar in the humanities, so I do have a particular bias, but we do want to look at that notion of bias and objectivity and question whether or not we are ever able to distance ourselves and our own thoughts, right, around the work and around around the work, around the literature. I'm not saying that it's not possible. I'm saying that it is a flimsy these are flimsy concepts, you know. And in the humanities and the arts, a lot of time is spent contesting the idea of objectivity and bias. This doesn't mean that we need to throw these concepts away. They are still extremely useful concepts because it encourages us to not cherry pick, to not only look at the literature that we are interested in, even though there's other things around our topic, to not discount a scholar's work because you don't like their methods or anything like that, right? So we always have to think about the ways in which bias and objectivity might come up in our work. It's not just about our personal opinions, it is about the choices that we make as researchers. But for me, if there's one takeaway, one really important takeaway about scientific rigor or being scientifically rigorous, is it's about, and this is for everyone across the board, systematic planning and execution of your research. And this is where the difference between academics and, academics and other researchers, this is where we see the difference between doing work within an academic context and doing work within the public sphere. In many cases in the public sphere, you'll also see that, academic concepts and academic methods for planning will feature, but in other sorts of research that might come up or other sorts of information that come up, for instance, in journalism, in broadcast media and those kinds of stuff, right? There isn't a system in place for how research or how information is collected and then how that information is tested. So the systematic planning and execution of your research, that should guide you as you move along, right? And I think that is a really expansive and generative way for us to understand scientific rigor. And it's a definition that I think is also quite inclusive because it doesn't deepen that divide that there is between the humanities, the social sciences, and the natural sciences. So you will know within your context, within your field, and within your discipline, you will know or you will find out how these notions of bias, objectivity, and rigor come into play. But like I said, systematic planning and execution of your research. So, introductions. We are going to look at how you start the story of your research, because that is essentially what an introduction is. It is starting the story of your research. And later on, I'm also going to ask you what the story of your research is, because whether you are in your proposal phase, whether you are writing your chapters, whether you are getting ready to submit, right? Your thesis or your proposal. So in the proposal phase, you are proposing, you're saying that the work still needs to be done, but you've already checked and you've read and you have enough to come up with a problem statement, right? If you are in the process of writing, this is a good way for you to check in the story that you promised in the beginning. Is that story be coming through in each and every chapter? If you're getting ready to submit, then your introduction and your conclusion, do they match? Do they complement each other, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then background to the research problem, sorry about that. Background to the research problem, this is how we are going to create the context for our examiners, for our reviewers, for our readers to understand the why of the research problem that you are going to take on. And then problem statements and research purpose. Now, for me, these two are completely connected to each other. The problem statement, I would say that the problem statement necessarily generates the research purpose, because once you know what the problem is, and remember, you're discovering what the problem is. If you are in your proposal phase, you are discovering the problem through the literature, through policy documents, and a whole other variety of information sites and sources. If you are writing your thesis, you have already, in each and every chapter, right? You are establishing your work. And then if you are getting ready to submit, this also becomes quite important for you, because that research problem and that problem statement and that research purpose, they need to complement each other, and they need to reflect the work that is and has been done, right? So we'll do a little bit on that as well. But let's start. So first impressions matter a lot. Now, beyond the abstract, the introduction is the first substantial piece of work that is going to be read by your examiners and your reviewers. Think about your own reading practices. I think last year, or I might be looking at maybe 2021, the knowledge economy produced, and this is now on a global level, about 250,000 new journal articles. I mean, that is enormous. And remember, this is happening on a yearly basis, right? As an academic, you are not expected to read everything. You have to read what is relevant to your work and to your project, and you need to read around it, right? But in order to understand what is, whether or not an article or book or chapter is useful for you, you read the title of the book, you read its introduction, because that's the chance that the author of the article or the book, that's when they have the chance to hook you in, right? But if the introduction doesn't cover the essence of the project, or if the introduction if it's a poor introduction and you're not quite clear what the text is about, or if the introduction isn't well written, you might very well not use that source, right? So introductions really matter, not only as, for your purposes writing a thesis, but also within the broader work world of knowledge production, right? This is the pitch. This is the chance that you have to convince somebody to come alongside you and to explore what it is that you've researched, whether that's social phenomena, natural scientific phenomena, and so on. Now, it guides the entire project, right? And it's going to steer your reader in the direction that you want them to go. But also, what it does is that it's an invitation for them, your reader, to come along for the ride, right? You are the captain of the ship, or the pilot of this plane, whatever, right? So you need to, through your introduction, make sure that your readers want to join you. And why would they want to join you? Because the journey is clear, they know where they're going, it's interesting. I mean, we all want to read interesting things, and your examiners are going to be experts in the field. So if you are saying something as you should, something new, something novel, something exciting, you need to make that upfront in your introduction. Don't hide the good stuff, right? Sound, that's where our idea of scientific rigor takes place. What are the methods that you are using to conduct this study, and how are you going about it? And then well planned. What you have to do in your introduction, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, is your introduction actually offers a substantive, right? A substantive overview of the proposal, of the thesis. So whether you're writing your proposal, you also need to do a chapter summary, or you have to show what the plan for your research is. Usually that is done through saying, in this chapter I'm going to do this, and then so forth and so forth. So you want the reader to come alongside you and join you, and you also want them to be amenable to your project, right? So again, what you're doing is you're putting up front, you're starting with clarity, you're capturing attention, right? And you're showing that you are applying scientific rigor to this. This is the difference between, making a documentary film and writing a PhD thesis, right? Every single step of the way, I'll go back, systematic planning and execution of your research. Can't say that enough. Now, it is one of the hardest chapters and the most important to write for all the reasons that I have listed above. So you make these promises that you must fulfill throughout your thesis. Every single chapter in your thesis needs to support the promises that you made in your introduction. And the funny thing with introductions is it's usually written towards the end of the project, right? But that doesn't mean that you can't work with a rough introduction, right? But it's written towards the end of the project because when you get to the end of the project, you know what your research findings are, you know what your recommendations are, you know the various ways in which your project is, you know the various ways in which your project has developed. You can speak to the challenges, you can speak to the weaknesses, you can speak to the new knowledge that you have produced. So all of that, right, information, it all comes up in your introduction. So you actually have to do the work first in order to write the introduction to your thesis or to your dissertation. With proposals, all of this is preliminary, right? So it is preliminary in the sense that you haven't done the work yet, right? But you have done the work that is necessary to produce a viable proposal. So that is what you need to keep in mind, right? You will follow the same steps, but you are writing it in the future tense. This project plans to. This project will engage, instead of writing it in the past tense. Now, you do need to write a rough introduction to get you started, but you must always be flexible. And this is why I think it's so important for us to emphasize, excuse me, I think this is why it's so important for us to emphasize the value of writing a strong proposal. Because if you have a strong proposal, you have a strong guide for your research, right? You have a map, and the map is going to take you from A to B, but there might be, you know, you might have to go to A1, A2, you might, you know, stall in the middle and do something else other than what you plan, but there's a rough guide, right? And that rough guide is underpinned by your assessment of the literature, your assessment of the field, of the practice, and so forth, right? You are showing us and you are convincing us that you are going to do a project of value, right? And a project that embodies scientific rigor. Now, the length of the, you must revise your introduction throughout the thesis, dissertation, writing process. I think this is self-evident, but it's a really good reminder for all of us, is that we must have flexibility with our research, and we have to reflect that in the written work, the actual project. So again, that is a part of your introduction. The length of an introduction varies according to institutions and disciplines, but a rule of thumb is to aim for around 10% of your total work out. Now, this can be quite contested, but most universities in South Africa, 80,000 to 100,000 words for a PhD. For a master's, about 35,000 to 50,000. So 10% of that, between 8 and 10,000 words, between 3,500 and 5,000 words. This is a rule of thumb, right? Depending on your discipline, your field of study, your topic of inquiry, your chapters are going to vary in length, and that's absolutely fine as long as you are including all the aspects that is necessary to make your project acceptable to the broader community, you know, the broader academic community in which you are working. So the introduction needs to tell us some really important things. And again, these things that the introduction is going to tell the readers are all based on the ways in which you have structured your study, okay? And the way in which you have identified the problem statement and the purpose statement, which we are going to deal with later. But what I want to emphasize, the introduction tells the reader how your thesis will, 1, help solve a practical or theoretical problem. When you are in your proposal phase, you are projecting, right? You are speculating in some ways, but not in the speculation in terms of, just pulling it out of the air. You're speculating it based on sound academic information and your research experiences or your experiences in industry and so forth. So the introduction tells your reader how your thesis will help to solve a problem, address a gap in the literature, build on existing research, propose a new understanding of your topic, and produce new knowledge. Now, we are in the business of knowledge production after all, right? That is what these advanced degrees that you are all doing, that's what it's about, right? It's about producing new knowledge. Now, you are not expected to do all of these things, but you might very well find that your thesis addresses 1 or 2, or that your thesis, you might find that your introduction and your thesis actually as a whole, you might find that it is responding to a theoretical problem, that it does address a gap in the literature, which then builds on existing research and proposes a new understanding of the topic. And I mean, if you've done all of this, you have definitely produced new knowledge. So don't be intimidated. If your work is purely going to be theoretical, that's absolutely fine. You take that, you own it, you ground it in your work. But if you see that more than one of these points apply to your work, then you need to make sure that this is upfront and in the introduction. A thesis is not like writing and I say this to myself as well, a thesis proposal, even an academic article, unfortunately, it's not like writing a mystery novel or, watching a film where there's this unfolding, right? And there's this element of surprise. In academic writing, what we're actually trying to do is make sure that there are absolutely no surprises. It's all upfront. It's all been, so to speak, handled by the researcher. The researcher will explain it. Well, they'll explain it and help to build an understanding of the work, right? So sometimes it's a little bit counterintuitive because the process of writing a thesis and of writing a proposal, even, these are processes of discovery, but the conventions of academic writing tells us that your introduction is the chapter wherein you put all your cards on the table. All right. So when I started, I said the introduction is the story of your thesis. And I would like to know, and we can talk about this in the Q&A. So if you want to screenshot this or write it down, please do, but I might just go back to it. But while we are in the session, just at the back of your mind to hold the following, right? This is a trick. I still use this trick today. I give it to all my students. It's an easy way for you to imagine. If you're in your proposal phase, you are imagining what you are going to do, right? So it can offer you that inspiration. If you are writing up chapters, if you are concluding your thesis, then you can use this little exercise as a way to test how you have done, to test the story of your thesis and how you have done in relation to the various categories that you promised would appear within the so-called narrative of the story of your thesis. So it begins like this, and I hope that you won't. Yeah, I hope that you will take on the storytelling metaphor just for the purposes that it's intended. It is a thinking technique or thinking technology that I really just wanted to share with you. It's not mine. In academia, we don't know. Sometimes these things are handed down, but we share it with the intent of using it for knowledge production. So once upon a time, researchers believed that. So this is you talking to existing literature, background to the problem, background and context of the problem. It's what was, right? The current state as well of a particular field of inquiry or a particular theme or topic in your research, or towards what your research is directed. So it's about referring to that. So once upon a time, researchers believed that, and you can fill it in. The trick here is to only use 1 or 2 lines maximum, right? But then I thought, now this is you. You as the researcher are coming into this existing field, and you are shifting, changing the conversation. And I think that is something that you need to really appreciate, because that is the creative work that all of you are doing, regardless of your discipline. You are doing that creative work. You are bringing a new thought. You are either going to help solve a practical problem or theoretical problem, address a gap in the literature, build on existing research, propose a new understanding of your topic, and produce new knowledge. Right? So again, that is 1 line. But these 1-liners will be thousands of words in your thesis. Okay, but it starts with the clarity that 1 or 2 lines can provide it with. So what I did, now this is speaking to your research design, your methodology. What are you going to do? Are you going to experiment? Are you going to test? What are you going to do? What are your methods, right? What are your methods to make this study possible? Because we might have the what, we might have the what, we might even have the why, but the how is extremely important. And again, this comes back to this term that we were playing around with earlier, scientific rigor. What is a method that is going to enable and we go back, your thoughts on this matter to be accepted within the broader academic community, right? So what you did, that's you bringing in your new knowledge, and you discovered that. Now, your thesis will make a particular discovery. It will, absolutely, if you are following the steps of writing a research proposal, if you are addressing the things that you need to address, you will make discoveries, you will find something new. And that can look very different, like I'll go back to the slide, it might be a theoretical thing, it might be, based in the literature, it might be practical, but that discovery becomes part of that discovery in this context are your findings. What did you find when you thought about this topic in a different way to which it has been thought about before? And that's you coming into your niche, right? That's your absolute niche, right? That is the particular thing that you are contributing. But we go from the narrow to the general. What is it going to do in bigger terms? What will it change? Will it change the way in which we conduct our research? Will it change the way in which a policy is understood? Will it change the way that mining works? What is your thesis going to change? Right? And I don't want you to think of that change as you coming in as, a hero. And I'm not being facetious, because often we feel like, when we get into the field, we feel like we really do need to make an impact. But in this sense, it's really about how has our work changed the way that we do certain things, the way that we think about certain things, the way that we act in response, right? So those are the kinds of more general findings that you can also draw out. And that will show that your research has transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary scope as well. Okay, so please do take please do take some time to just think about the story of your thesis, and I hope that it's a useful tool for you. Now, introduction, there are a few general rules. And I'm going to go through quite a few, but I wanted to just, these are kind of the things that are compulsory. I don't like that word compulsory, but let's use it for what it is. So your introduction must have a context to the topic. Right now, this is inviting your researcher into, inviting your reader into a conversation that you have now started, right? Or an aspect of a conversation that you have now started. So that is part of the work that you do, right? The context might be theoretical, philosophical, it might be about industry, it might be practical, it might be phenomenological, it might be a whole range of things. But what is the context in which this topic lives and breathes, and from which it arose, right? Because, yeah, nothing stands alone. Everything is connected. So the context of the topic is really important. And this is where you make yourself understood. And that is a really important thing. And also, you don't just want to be understood, you also want to be convincing, right? So if you give your reader enough information, and not just, in terms of how much information, but in terms of the substance of that information, if you give them the right information, then they'll go way beyond just understanding your work. They will develop an appreciation for that work, right? And I think that is extremely, it's humbling. It really is. As a scholar, it's humbling when someone else appreciates your work, but it's also indicative that you are doing the right kind of work and that your work is accessible. Okay. Something I always tell my postgraduate students, because they often worry about, this whole idea of producing new knowledge and this and that, and I always say to them, I don't think that we are aiming to be the best at what we do. I think that we need to aim, sorry, my screen just went blank, but it's appeared again. So I don't think that we're aiming to be the best at what we do. I think that we're aiming to be the only people that do what we do, right? That you become the expert on a particular niche, but the trick with that is not to let your niche limit you. It's to let that niche grow, but also for you to have enough general understanding and expertise in your discipline and in your field so that you are not only a niche expert, but that you are also serving your field in various other ways. Okay, and this is really where there's so much room for collaboration, not competition, collaboration, various studies between fields of inquiry and even disciplines. So focus and scope. What specific aspect of the topic will you address? Over here, you should include your why, because your inclusions necessarily mean that there are exclusions, right? So you cannot do everything, and you're not expected to do everything. But what are the particular parameters in which your research is concerned or placed? Right? And why? Why have you chosen the particular aspect that you have chosen? And then again, here with focus and scope, how does your work fit into existing studies on the topic? You might say that, my work takes a different methodological approach, or my work is going to explore, if the topic is, for instance, let's say the topic is global warming, my work is not going to focus on climate change, it's going to focus on sustainable food security. Why did you make that choice? You need to be able to explain that, justify it, and to a level convince your reader that the way that you have chosen and what you've chosen to focus on, and how you've created the scope of your project, that is a scientifically rigorous process, right? This is when we go beyond our interests, and also it means that we become very deeply embedded in the literature and in the practices of the discipline that you are involved in. Questions and objectives. This has to be up front and center for your thesis. I'm going to actually spend a little bit of time on that as well, but we need you to tell us your research questions, sub-questions, and objectives. How are you going to do what you say? What are you going to do? And how are you going to do what you say you are going to do? Now, the methodological approach. Here, you have to give us some detail into your research design. Apologies for that. And methods, for the typo, into your research design and methods. How are you going to conduct the study? Right? How are you going to do it in a systematic way? Your methodology necessarily has to align with your questions and objectives, your focus and scope, as well as the context of your topic, right? So we need to think very carefully, because this is where you show the systematic way in which you are approaching this topic. Now, for some of us in different fields, in some fields, findings might be very straightforward. They're a result of quantitative research. They are a result of experiments, lab work, and those kinds of things. In other fields, findings are more discursive, right? It's more about the interpretation of the particular researcher and the ways in which they have engaged theories, concepts, data, and so forth. So, just think through what is suitable for you and for your work. And I know that there've been some amazing sessions on methodology and focus and scope as well. So it's always a good idea to go back to that. And then it's always obvious, but sometimes we don't do this. But you must offer an overview of the thesis structure. Again, this is about no surprises. No surprises, no secrets, don't hold anything back. Tell us, if you are in your proposal phase, you are writing in the future tense, right? Chapter 1 will, chapter 2 will, right? If you are writing, if you're on your writing process, or you are getting ready to submit your thesis, then it changes. Then you say, chapter 2 explored the various ways into chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4. You tell us what you did there, and you tell us what is important. Now you have to also be careful with what you background and what you foreground, right? But you need to make sure that you're giving the reviewer enough so that they know exactly what to expect and in which order to expect it. Yeah, sometimes it feels quite pedantic, but as you continue on with your work, and as you write, and as you collect your data, you do your research, and you write and you read, you will see that there are ways in which you can present this that doesn't kind of, look formulaic, but still covers the necessary points. Now, there are a few steps to follow. This was quite helpful. So in an introduction, excuse me, you must state the general topic and give some background, right? Here, we have to open with a strong hook, right? And you are not talking about the specific things that you are going to explore, but you are talking about the topic in more general terms. All right. Then you must provide a review of literature related to the topic. Now, this is preliminary. Oopsie. This is always preliminary, right? In your introduction. If you're writing your proposal, this is your preliminary literature review. If you're writing your thesis, this is where you offer a taste, right? Just a little taste of the literature, right? And the state of the field within that context. Because you are likely, and this is again discipline dependent, you are likely to have a full literature review chapter. I know in some fields it's not like that, and then within your introduction, you might have to do your literature review there. But just consider that and check in with your discipline. What are people doing, right? What are people doing in your field? Are they doing full literature reviews, or are they doing shorter literature reviews within the introductory paragraph? But you have to nod to the literature, because the literature shows us that you are embedded within the topic. Define the terms and the scope, we've spoken about that. Outline the current situation. What is the state of the field? What is happening, right? So this might be talking about the topic at which your attention is directed. So this might be quite practical. It can be just directed at the research, you know, in and of itself on that particular topic. But what is the current situation that is leading you to do the work that you are planning to do? Just an outline of that, right? It's allowing your reader to follow your line of analysis throughout your work, right? Then, and you now have to be critical, you must evaluate the current situation, the disadvantages and the advantages and the disadvantages. And it's in that you will identify the gap, right? And that gap is, the strongest rationale that you will need for your study, because you're showing us that we need more, that we need something different. So it's really important. And then to identify the importance of the proposed research over here. This might not apply to everyone, but there's research significance and there's real significance. For many of us pursuing advanced research, right? If you are thinking of a career in academia, or if you are working within various industries, the research problem, right, becomes part of how you feature, right, or how you view the, excuse me, sorry about that. And identify the importance. So the research significance is about what knowledge, right? It's more about the general knowledge that you bring to this field, to this discipline. Okay, and that's for everybody who's working in the discipline. They will be able to engage the research significance. The real significance, and this is again quite arguable, different disciplines and fields do this in ways that they feel fit, and the real significance is what problem is your thesis alleviating, or how is your thesis giving us a different way to think about something in society, or a different way to do it, right? Now, when we take it out of the research, right, and we bring it into that real significance, they aren't really supposed to be separated. And this is really where you need to sit and you need to think when you go back to, you need to think when you are looking at your the outline and the current situation. This is really where you have to identify that gap, but that gap needs to be significant enough for you. It needs to be significant enough that you are able to justify why we need to pay attention to this. Okay. State the research problem and questions. We'll talk more about this later. But again, no surprises up front. Research aims, your hypothesis, outline the methodology, outline the order of information for the thesis. That is your thesis That is your thesis structure, chapter structure. Now, I want to just have a word on background because we were talking about scientifically rigorous introductions and background. So I really appreciate this quote, and I think that you would as well. Background is not simply us telling background is not just telling us about the particular problem, right? Background information identifies and describes the history, right? So we're looking at the chronological and the nature. So the substantive elements of a well-defined research problem with reference to contextualizing existing literature, right? So again, you must be grounded and embedded in the expertise that is already out there on your particular topic. The background information should indicate the root of the problem being studied, if it is possible to find the root of an issue, the appropriate context of the problem in relation to theory, research, and/or practice, its scope, and the extent to which previous studies have successfully investigated the problem, noting in particular where gaps exist that your study attempts to address. Background information does not replace the literature review section of a research paper or thesis. It is intended to place the research problem within a specific context and an established plan for its solution. And I think this is a brilliant quote, right? Because background is not just background, right? When we think of background, it's literally something that holds your study together, right? It's something upon which your study rests. And we need to, and this is why I think it's so important for us to spend this time thinking, and for you to spend this time thinking about these smaller components, right, of writing your introduction, your background, your problem statement, to think about these smaller components and to experiment with how these smaller components are going to fit into the whole of your project. Everything might not apply to everyone, but you can use your discernment in that regard. I spoke a little about this earlier, from the general to the specific and back again, zooming in and zooming out. So while you must start your paper, you must start your paper, your proposal, your thesis with a broad position, right? That's us going wide. You explain why the field for your research matters and why it's relevant. Now, this is an opportunity, and I always say this is where you must shine, right? You shine, and we must be modest, but it's also where you show off. You showing your examiner, you are showing your reader how embedded you are in the literature, how embedded you are in the field, right? It's showing that you know what's going on, and you also know what needs to be done, what needs to be added. So, and that's when you bring your particular view into this. After that, you go to narrower, so you zoom in, and then you find points which lie in your niche, the particular area that you are interested in, and you then have to explain to us why it matters for the topic. But then you must go wide again, make connections between specific and general things to show the results of your research. And this will answer the so what question. And the so what question is, it's probably the most important question. What matters? So what? Right? And I'm not saying that in an argumentative way. It really is for you to sit down and to consider the so what question. What is this for? So we know what it's about, but what is this for? Right? How does it change things within industries, within society, within various institutions? And you really need to look for that in your work. When we think about the discourses about the decolonization of education and our turn towards decoloniality, we don't actually have the, I think we don't actually have the privilege of just doing research for the sake of doing research, right? When we're doing research, we really are trying to better our society and create a more just world. Okay, so what is a research problem? A research problem is a specific issue or gap in existing knowledge that you aim to address in your research. You may choose to look for practical problems aimed at contributing to change or theoretical problems aimed at expanding knowledge. This is straight from the UNISA proposal guidelines, and it's excellent, right? You need to identify the specifics, the gaps that you will address. And then, as I said earlier, we have the practical problems that you are contributing to, and then we also have theoretical problems aimed at expanding knowledge. Now, you could do both. You're likely to do one or the other, but these are both, let's say, and I'll say this in storytelling way, but these are both noble pursuits. If you are addressing a particular practical problem and that has social value, or that will change the way that we do something so that it's better, so that it's more just, so that it's changed, right? That is, yeah, that is completely acceptable, right? And that might be you might even be able to see the recommendations of your studies being implemented. But, and this is what, I think this is the difference of, about being in an academic environment, theoretical problems aimed at expanding knowledge. That is a noble pursuit as well. Because when we expand knowledge, we are helping people to think differently. And when people think differently, they can come up with more diverse solutions for the issues that we have in society. So your thesis might not change anything practical that you can see, but it will expand knowledge on your particular topic and contribute to the knowledge economy. And this is what we need in a rigorous democratic society, right? We need a strong knowledge economy, and all of you are doing the good work of contributing to that. Research problems. So with a research problem, you need to be able to state the topic and its significance. You would have worked this out earlier. Contextualize the research problems. It contextualizes your research topic and it helps define what researchers plan to investigate. It also provides a framework for reporting research results that highlight the information that is discovered. Now, there are three main types of research problems. I say main types because there are, a little bit more fringe categories, but there's the theoretical, and we spoke about that earlier. The theoretical as expanding knowledge on a particular topic, applied as in testing knowledge, and action as in like literally producing, producing change. Now, applied and action often, they're often collapsed into each other, even though there are some nuances. Yes. Now, problems and purpose. We're speaking about the problems, but the problem, the research problem, will reveal your research purpose. And this is an exercise, again, an inherited exercise, something that I do with my own students. And maybe you can screenshot this as well, but the purpose of my research is to. Now, once you have your research problem and you understand your research problem, you can discover your research purpose. And you should be able to do that in 1 or 2 lines. The purpose of my research is to do what? Now, from your purpose, you develop a main research question. It derives directly from your purpose, because if that's your purpose, that is also the questions that you want answered. Thereafter, you must have 3 to 4 sub-questions. What, where, why, how, who, right? All of those sub-questions must be directly related to your research purpose. And this is where we start to shape our scope This is where we start to really produce the boundaries within where our study will lie. Then, from those 3 to 4 sub-questions, directly derived must be 3 to 4 objectives. Now, the objectives, and again, you know, there are many more examples, and this year I've also taken from the UNISA handbook, the proposal handbook guide, so that information is there for us. But it is things like determine, establish, develop, identify, monitor, explore, define, describe, assess, evaluate, right? It is the action words. It is the what and the how and the why of what you are doing, right? So those are words, you know, some words we know belong to certain fields. Others, you know, are a little bit more slippery. But a really good practice is for you to read other people's theses, those who have come before you, and to find out what the conventions in your field or your discipline are. And then I just want to end off with a little example. This is from a study that a student of mine is doing, and she's been kind enough to allow me to share this. So the purpose, she's got a research purpose. The purpose of my research is to explore the connections and convergences between social norms and social ostracism within the context of digital spaces. That was supposed to be digital religion, but that's fine, digital spaces. What are the relationships between social norms? Now, these are the research questions that have derived from the research purpose, right? That research purpose can be turned into a main question just by asking, what are the connections and convergences between social norms and social ostracism? Now, again, this looks very pedantic and formulaic, but it is just the thinking technology. Okay. So, what are the relationships between social norms and social ostracism within digital religion? How do social norms and social ostracism feature and function in the context of digital religion and online shaming? Why do the relationships between social norms and social ostracism within the context of digital religion and online shaming feature and function in the way that they do? Now, the directives are directly derived. It's to describe, to explore, and to theorize. You might have 2 descriptive questions. You might have 2 explanatory chapters. You might be you might have, all of your questions might be theoretical or lead you to, through the process of theorizing. But those are the action words that will determine later on the how of your study, which methods you develop, and how you execute those methods in designing a project that will reflect scientific rigor across the board, not just within your discipline or your field of study, but in transdisciplinary and interdisciplinary ways. Because even though we might differ on what our definitions in the in the humanities and the natural sciences, even though we might differ on what exactly scientific rigor means, we all agree that it is something that is worth aspiring for. So thank you so much for your attention. I am going to end this PowerPoint presentation and take some questions. Thank you so much. All right, there I am. Sure. Just waiting for the questions to load. If you like, you can also, in the chat, you can also share the story of your research. Any questions or comments? Okay, greetings. Is it possible to get a recording? Of course, a recording. And I just need to make a few adjustments with the typos, but this will be available for you. Any questions? We can go all the way back to the introduction, the introduction to writing a scientifically rigorous introductory overview. Just flipping through the slides. Oh, thank you. Well, irrespective of whether, oh, thank you so much for your thanks. Thank you for your attention and your enthusiasm. So even if we don't engage now within the Q&A, I would really like for you to try these thinking techniques. The story of the thesis, tell it to yourself as a story and see what you come up with. You can refine that story and then you can remove the once upon a time, the but then I thought, and you can see how that will fit into the various academic norms and conventions that we follow when we write. Then also, and I will make a separate slide to, I'll make a separate slide on this because I think that it's really useful, again, as a thinking technique. The purpose, the research problem reveals the research purpose. The research purpose develops and reveals your main research question, and then we're breaking it down, right? And your questions obviously influence your objectives. So if you can think, if you can use these categories just as thinking technologies, you don't need to write them into your thesis, but just to know that these are the components that you need to see. You can present it however you want to, but you can present it however you want to, but it's just that this must be present. In any research, in any discipline, this is what we need to see up front. Remember, no surprises, no secrets. Does the theoretical foundation literature review chapter have to be done? Here's a question, sorry. Does the theoretical foundation literature review chapter 2 have to be done with systematic review, or should this be done in chapter 3 doing systematic review? So why would it be done in chapter 3? I hope I can answer you with this, Budu, because I'm not quite catching the question. But the literature review chapter is usually the second chapter of a thesis. In your proposal or in your thesis, in your proposal or your introduction, you will give us a taste of the literature review, just enough for us to establish what the gap is, right? So thereafter, you expand on that. So when you give us that little taste, you need to be quite accurate, and that is what we want to see you develop within your second chapter. Chapter 3s can vary. I don't know why the systematic literature review would be in chapter 3. But remember, systematic review is also a particular way of doing a literature review. And I think it's an excellent method, but others might do like a thematic kind of, might do like a thematic review, might do a retrospective historical review. So there are different ways to do it. But I would say really literature review is usually chapter 2 in the thesis, because that's you showing that you know the scholarly community and becoming a part of it, showing how your work contributes. SLR. Yes. So in collecting your data, so this is an excellent question. So SLR, systematic literature review, is key. So if you're doing your data collection and your methodology in chapter 3, you will have a systematic review on your methodology, right? So that can be included, and it should be included in chapter 3. But in chapter 2, remember your topic is going to have various components. So in chapter 2, you might be focusing on the literature, you're focusing on the academic work and the literature that speaks to the substance of your particular topic, right? So that is speaking to the what of your topic, the what and the, I suppose, the what and the why of your topic, right? But when you get to methodology, in methodology chapter, you are necessarily speaking about that process, right? And a systematic literature review is necessary in order for your methods to be deemed suitable and appropriate, right? And to have scientific rigor. So, yeah. You can check in with, your supervisor, obviously, and also do look at examples of other theses, but depending on the discipline, it really does differ. I mean, for some, a systematic literature review is the entire project. That's some master studies. In others, I've seen a literature review for each of the first 2 to 3 chapters of the thesis, theoretical literature review, which also includes the conceptual work, and a methodological one. So just check in with your supervisor and the norms and conventions of your particular field. Yes, when planning to enroll for their masters, is this a similar framework for proposal? Absolutely. All these components must always be present. Thanks for this question, Obi. It's just how much you're going to give and how much you're going to do. So I think that the masters, I speak under correction here, but your master's proposal is about 12 pages and your PhD proposal is, I think, 15 to 20 pages. I'm not 100% sure of that, but it's only the length that varies. The expectations are exactly the same. Well, I must say that the expectations for a master's thesis is not really to, we don't expect students to produce new knowledge, right? They might just be commenting on the field. They might just be finding the gap, right? We don't expect that. But I think that if you are going to do that work, you can pursue, you can pursue the production of new knowledge. But for a PhD, it's completely, that is what it hinges on. You have to produce new knowledge, whether that is a practical change in society or in some industry or whatever, or it is just, or not just, you see, I shouldn't say that. Or it is a theoretical contribution that will expand the knowledge that exists, then that is what is expected within a PhD. But I believe that master's students should really be aspiring to do that, because I think, sometimes these statuses, master's, PhD, doctor, professor, sometimes they create these hierarchies. And I think if a master's student has an excellent idea that is going to contribute to their field and is going to produce new knowledge, that should definitely be encouraged. But yes, it is a similar framework. There's just a difference in what is expected. 3,500 words to 5,000 for your chapter, your introductory chapter in a master's, and then 8,000 to 10,000 words for the introductory chapter to your PhD. Again, this might vary, but that's a good rule of thumb. I think something that I just want to mention is that you will often find that even when you are not doing so-called literature review, throughout your thesis, you are consistently reviewing literature, right? You are consistently reading what others have written on various components that are also relevant to your thesis. So bear that in mind as well, right? That we have these separate structures and chapters and things, but invariably, these structures, these chapters, these things, they will overlap, and they'll overlap, but they must overlap in a way that makes sense and that reflects the rigor of your work. So all of this becomes connected. And when you guys write your books, because all of you, I believe, will write fantastic books derived from your thesis, then you will have a little bit more, you'll have a little bit more creativity, because then you're able to narrativize your work. Okay. Any other comments, questions? Anything? Okay. I hope that you found this evening's session valuable, useful to your work. I wish you all the best with preparing for whatever you need to submit by the end of this year. And I hope that I just hope that it will be a really good 2 months until we can enjoy a little bit of a break in December. So I wish you well. Thank you so much, all of you, for your for being in the space with me today. It was an absolute pleasure and privilege. I will make sure that the PowerPoint gets to the team and that it is available for you. So thank you so much and good evening. Bye-bye. Oh, wait, sorry. Oh, a few more questions have arrived. So I'm not saying goodbye. This is great. Okay. What question should be addressed when working on the problem statement? Should be asked. What question should be addressed when working on the problem statement? So when you're working on your problem statement, it actually becomes more descriptive, right? You are describing the phenomena that you are interested in, right? And then you are describing the way that your phenomena has been studied. So you're first asking, like, what is the context in which this phenomena is located? Then you are looking at what has been written about this? What is the literature saying? What is the research saying, right? So you're asking the problem you're saying, what is the context of this issue, of this problem? And then how has it been addressed in the literature? You can even, at this point, when you're trying to work through your problem statement, you can even go and, like, if it's a public issue, like, you can say, like, how have the courts or the government or, various industries. So you're asking the question of the context of the problem and then how the problem has been addressed. And then you are going to say, listen, this is not sufficient. The way that it's been addressed is not sufficient, and I'm going to add to that. And that's when you bring in your particular view. So the problem that you have, it must be directed towards the phenomena, to the topic, but also to the ways in which the topic has been addressed, right? Because you are definitely going to add to, you're going to add to the research on that topic, and you will provide a new way of seeing it. How can one avoid having a replica? Oh, I'm not sure what that means. I'm so sorry. If you can elaborate, that would be good. But if you're asking a question about repetition, then Yeah, that becomes a style issue as well, right? It's very challenging not to sound repetitive in your work because there is so much overlap and because so much clarity is, needed. Your research questions are going to, your research questions will appear in almost every chapter of your thesis. But there will be some repetition. What is important for us to remember when that is happening, when we see that repetition in our work, and your supervisors are going to be able to, really guide you in this regard because they are your independent reader, right? So what we need to be careful for is when we see that we are starting to repeat ourselves, we need to ask, is it necessary for me to repeat myself here? Or am I repeating myself because I haven't looked beyond these particular ideas, or because I don't know the answer? Ask yourself when you are becoming a little bit repetitive. The other thing is also, substantively different. When things are substantively different, we can instantly tell. But when, in discussion and in presentation of your findings and things, I think that repetition will, insofar that it isn't a major style issue, that repetition will serve you well as you go through your work. And then once you go to your editing process, you can always shift and change things around. Very informative session, and just in time for me to apply the method when I prepare my research. Oh, well done for preparing your research outline for the PhD. I'm glad that you can use this. And again, like I said, please adjust as you see fit. There are some rules of thumb, but none of this is carved in stone. And as emerging academics, as students of advanced research, you have that prerogative. You've done the work. You're doing the work, and you've done the work necessary for your thoughts and your ideas to be taken seriously in the academy. The thesis is just the way that we present it within the norms of the intellectual function of the university. So have confidence and be encouraged. Take care, everyone.